Hey, thank you so much for joining us at our Crosspoint Church podcast. Now, if you're new to our podcast or maybe new to our church in general, we're just a bunch of messed up people who don't have it all together, running after a heavenly leader who loves us and meets us right where we are. We hope this message encourages you, builds your faith, and strengthens your confidence as you continue down this journey of what it means to know and follow Jesus. Enjoy this message.
Oh man, great scene from Crazy Rich Asians talking about game theory, which really a lot of psychology between winning and losing. And honestly, we all like competition, right? Whether you like board games or whether you're into like all out, like on the field competition, maybe you're into like personal competition, like solitaire. That's competition, right? Any solitaire fans, by the way, out there? Yeah, okay, a few of you. So, whether you're participating in the competition, whether you're watching it, there's, it just kind of pulls us in, right? And in fact, when you're watching, how about the Pacers again? You guys excited about the Pacers? Man, they're making a run. So fun. Now, just out of curiosity, how many of you have been over-inspired after you've watched a game and you're like, I'm going to go out and shoot a few hoops myself? Because I've noticed this in my neighborhood. It just, and you go out and the professionals make it look so easy, right? You're like, I used to do this. And before you even get out the door, you pulled a hammy. And so, it's just funny how we get inspired and because competition has a way of pulling us in. And so we're going to talk about this weekend. We're in a brand new series that we're kicking off that you've heard about, and really excited about this. So welcome to Crosspoint. My name's Curt, and if you're here for the first time this weekend, I just think the beginning of a new series is always a great time to start at a church and just see if this is a landing place for you. And so I encourage you to check us out for the next few weeks and just see if God begins to speak to you. Maybe you even want to make this your home. And let's make some noise for those joining us online this weekend. Man, so excited to have you join us through the screen this weekend. And we want you to know that church isn't a location or even a place on a calendar, a time on a calendar, but it's a movement of people going after Jesus, and we believe you're a part of that this weekend. So thank you for joining us. Now, I've got another all skate for us here. I want you to kind of raise your hands on this. Those of you at home can play along as well. Anybody here, would you consider yourself, or have you ever been told that you are overly competitive? Just raise your hand if you're overly, oh my gosh, look at the hands go up, yeah. And some of you, like, you're like, I got the hand up before he even finished the sentence, right? You're like that competitive, yeah. And so, and some of you are like, did I really put my hand up? You didn't even know you did it, because it just naturally comes, right? How about this question? Here's another, let's all play along, raise your hand. If anybody has ever injured someone else during a board game or card game, pit, spoons, Dutch Blitz. I know some of you, somebody here I played with that we demolished a card table one time playing spoons. That probably is a good indicator that you are overly competitive. I'm overly competitive, and so if that's you, we're in good company together. And so, a number of years ago, when right after we'd had our first child, Macy, I'd been playing in an adult league softball league. It was actually a church team, but we're not playing in the pony league. We're going to play in the competitive, city league. So that's what we were doing. And so we had our first child, and I took a few weeks off work and a few weeks off everything. And so I set out from softball for a few weeks. And my wife's mom came to town, and so she was with us for a couple weeks. And I said to my wife, hey, I know they're down a couple guys. You mind if I go play? And she's like, hey, that's fine. It was a Tuesday night doubleheader league. She said, it is just one condition, don't get hurt. All right. And she knew that I had a propensity, because I used to be a pitcher in high school, and I've had all kinds of shoulder problems and damage and dislocations and repairs. And so I've kind of adjusted to that in my adult years. And so I just said, okay, I'm going to adjust and make sure I kind of put some things in place so I don't get hurt tonight. And so I wore shorts. I'm like, if I wear shorts, it'll remind me that I'm not competitive and I'm just out here to have fun, right? And so, I show up, I play, and everything's going great until I hit a gapper between, right center and right field, and I'm like, man, I can stretch this single into a double. And so, I'm rounding first base, and about halfway to second, I'm like, wow, that relay is coming in a lot quicker than I thought it was. Those guys tracked that thing down. And before I knew it, my competitive spirit just kicked in, and I'm midway through a slide into second base, and realize, oh crap, I'm not competing tonight. I'm not competitive. I've got shorts on. So I did the number one cardinal sin of sliding. I actually put my right arm down to catch myself. And the good news is I was safe. The bad news was I came up with a dislocated wrist and a Colles fracture and landed in the emergency room that night and in a surgery room 3 days later and 4 pins and a full arm cast for 8 to 9 weeks, which doesn't mesh real well with an infant newborn and changing diapers. And so my wife, I mean, it's not that she was mad at me. She was very upset with the way I was managing my competitive spirit. And so if you are competitive, I just want you to know listen, we're in the same boat together. And so you may be that person, but the one thing we're going to be looking at is that's all fine and good on the field, but there's one area, all right? And to kind of keep this in the sports realm, there's one arena, if you will, where games just need to be off limits because they can be so harmful, so toxic. I mean, I would almost use the word lethal. That might just be a little too intense. But we just need to avoid the games at all costs, and that is in our relationships. And it's just a realm that, relationally speaking, and you've probably had experience with, you've probably experienced this, but relationally speaking, a game that requires a loser is a game that nobody wins. Let me say that again. A game that, when you bring competition into a relationship, all right, and some kind of challenge or competition, whatever it might be, and we're going to talk about what this looks like in a few moments, but any type of game that actually requires a loser, that's going to be a game, relationally at least, that nobody ever wins. Everybody always loses. Now, to kind of illustrate this, I want us to just think of the arena where we play this out the most. So I want you to think of home right now, all right? And so home is different for all of us. This could be your family of origin with your parents. This could be, maybe you're living with roommates. Maybe you're living with your family or a blended family. But home is where we experience this the most. Now, here's the question I want you to think about. Have you ever won an argument at home? All right, I just want you to think about this. Now, I know you've had arguments at home, all right, with your parents or with your roommates, even with your spouse, partner, whoever it might be. But have you ever won an argument at home? And you're like, I definitely have won the argument at home, right? We've all won arguments at home. And so that kind of leads us to the next question, which is, okay, as you think about that, exactly what is it that you won? All right? Like meaning, what was the prize? Like, congratulations, you get to sleep on the couch tonight? Like, you really let her know, right? But like, now you're sleeping downstairs. Or congratulations, you won, you powered up, but your son hates your guts. I mean, your son wants nothing to do with you now. And yeah, everybody would say, wow, you were even right. I mean, the things that you said, and when you powered up, like, you let him have it. But like, now he's like, yeah, I don't want anything to do with you. Or even congratulations, listen, that last little zinger, I mean, it's like you had the conversation, you just had to get the little zinger in there, and you definitely, left your daughter speechless and also in tears. I mean, nobody's going to disagree that you were even right in what you were saying, but like, what's the prize? Like a victory lap around the kitchen island? Like, what are we going for right here, right? And so when it comes to games in our relationships, whenever you think you won, I mean, if it's that roommate and you're like, well, I told them they should never do this again, whatever it is, whatever that happens in a relationship, at the end of the day, it's always ending in a negative spirit. And so, whenever we bring competition, I mean, sports, competition, to use that analogy and context, into a relationship, especially those that are most important, but really into any relationship, it just doesn't work. And the reality is we often tend to do this, myself included. All right, so this is an all skate for us right here. All right, we have this natural draw to bring competition and challenge into our relationships, whether it's home, whether it's work, and you might get your way, but at the end of the day, we actually lose something along the way. And so here is kind of why that's the case. In fact, this is going to kind of be the driving principle, and I want to kind of put it in a question form. So when it comes to relationships, and you don't have to like yell this out loud, I just want you to think about this. When it comes to relationships, what is the win in a relationship? I just ask yourself, what is the win in a relationship when it comes to relationships? The win is actually the relationship, right? That's actually the win. All right, the win is like the mutual satisfying, mutually enjoyable relationship. All right, and so it's not an individual win. All right, if there's an individual win, that usually means there's an individual loss, and whenever somebody loses, that means the relationship loses. But the relationship is actually the win. So real quick, I want to just go through a whole list of games, and you've seen some of these modeled before. In fact, unfortunately, some of us are going to self-identify in some of these games, just letting you know. And so for the next few minutes, I'm going to just kind of list some games, and I want to like encourage you to resist, identifying the games in the person next to you, all right? So like no elbows or side eyes or like gasps, and you're like, honey, I didn't do anything. She's like, yeah, but you like breathed heavy. Everybody knows. lose. Like, that's our issue right there. So, like, let's just not do any of that, okay? I want you to think about what if I just evaluate me right here? Are there any of these unhealthy competitions, competitiveness that I'm dragging into relationships where there's a winner? Because if there's a winner, then ultimately that means there's a loser, and that means that we're losing. All right, so I'm going to start with some of the most famous games. The first one here is the change game. Now, the change game is where you try to figure out how to change the other person without them knowing it, right? Because perhaps you got into a relationship and you're like, yeah, he's got some issues, she's got some issues, or maybe you're married to somebody who has issues, or maybe, you're engaged to someone, you're a fiance, and you're like, well, I'm going to just kind of subtly try to change them, without them knowing it. And the problem is this is foolish because, they know what you're trying to do just like you would know what they're trying to do. And so I always say to couples, like, if you're entering a marriage, trying to change one of the others, then you're like a project. Like, you're going to be a project the whole time. So that's the change game. All right, then there's the guessing game. Now, my wife Julie and I, we've been married for 29 years this summer, and I've began to figure this out over the last few years. This one's taken me some time, but I've been growing on this. The guessing game, it goes this way. The guessing game is kind of like, okay, I'm not going to tell you what's going on. You're going to have to guess, all right? And so we go through these rounds where, and we do it sometimes 3 or 4 times where she'll be like, hey, is there something wrong? And I'm like, well, no, nothing's wrong. Why do you ask that? She's like, well, it just seems like something wrong. And then, I'll keep moping around. She'll be like, well, is something wrong? And so we'll like go through that process a few times. And by like the 3rd or 4th time, it's kind of like, well, if I have to tell you, then obviously you don't care, right? And so you got to guess. So that's why it's called the guessing game. Now, the thing about this, and the thing that kind of helped me grow or maybe even get past this, is my wife Julie, she just doesn't play along. she sometimes she's like, hey, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. And sometimes I'm like, gosh, I just wish, she would notice things, or, because I don't want, we don't want to like say it, right? And so she's like, I don't know what's going on. You're going to have to figure that out. And she moves on. And so that's actually helped me grow. And so that's a good thing. Anyway, moving on. The next one is the guilt game. Now, we've all probably experienced the guilt game where, we're on the other side of somebody that's like, all right, so you're really going to leave that there, huh? So like, instead of like just saying, hey, what's going on right here, in addressing it, we kind of, play the guilt card, and it's like, I guess I'm going to have to go by myself again, right? And so that's the guilt game. And then we probably have all participated in the blame game. And that's basically where we just don't want to take responsibility, right? And in fact, we blame other people all the time. In fact, we even blame them for our behavior. It's like, well, if you weren't like you are, then I wouldn't have to be the way I am. And so it's really not my fault, it's your fault. And again, the cycle just continues. And then there's actually something called the next level blame game. And this is where like it becomes passive aggressive in blame. And this is like so powerful and yet so damaging, just so you know, but so powerful. This is where like you apologize, but you include blame in the apology, right? Like, so you're like, I am really sorry for the way I reacted when you came home from the gym an hour late again. And so it's like, I thought you were apologizing, but that feels like you're still blaming me. And so that's the next level blame game. All right, then we have what we've all probably experienced, the comparison game. All right, we've all been in a place where we're like, we've fallen into, hey, do you see what they're doing? I can't believe what she said. And all of a sudden we're back and forth in comparison, which is very, very similar to the shame game. And the shame game goes something like, well, if my dad were here, he would be able to fix this pretty quick. And you probably should know how to do this. You should probably be mature enough to, anytime you include should or ought, usually there's some shaming going on right there. And, ultimately that's done because we're trying to change someone. And so if you've ever been on the receiving end of the shame game or the comparison game or really any of these games, you know what it does internally with the person that is playing against you. Like, you just begin to feel resentment. And the same thing is actually kind of going on with the person initiating it. And before long, you're just like tricked into playing. And some of us are even realizing some of these are habits, right? Like, for some of us, we just reach for these tools because this is how we get things done. Now, there's a couple more games, and these are awful, by the way, but I'm going to mention to you anyway. The next one's called the family of origin game. Now, it's just how it sounds, You're behaving just like your father, right? Or, my word, you sound just like your mother. And all of a sudden you're trapped, right? Because if you're honest, you're like, I probably am. It's been modeled for. I probably am doing that. But here's the thing. even if you're right, all right, even if you're right, the other person's usually not going, gosh, I am so glad you pointed that out. There's nothing more in the world I want to know is that I'm just like my mom or just like my dad, all right? And so here's the thing, even if they're right, it's not like it's helping, all right? This is the problem with these games, all right? Anytime we dabble in these games, it doesn't do anything for the relationship, and none of them motivate us to want to be better. And then this last one here that we'll at least list today is called the motive assignment game. Now, this is a really hard one to get right, but some of us keep trying. And so this is where, you kind of believe you can like read other people's minds, all right? And you can be like, well, I know why they did that. And they don't even know why they did that. It may not be that deep, all right? But you're like, well, I know why you did this. And they're like, well, how do you know that? And you're like, because I can read your soul. Like I can see into your heart. I know what's going on in there. And you're just like, if you wouldn't be so selfish, or if you just wouldn't be, as focused on worrying about what other people think. And so, you assign a motive to it. And even, again, if I'm correct in this, right, like I'm trying to win, at the end of the day, that means they're losing. And so we're in a win-lose moment, and ultimately the relationship loses. However, if you're competitive and you're like, man, I love dragging competition into my relationships with people I love the most, people I work with, people I'm, live with, people I'm connected to, there is one game that comes highly recommended, all right? And you can do this in your family. You can do this, with our community. You can do this at your work, all right? I mean, we can do this as a nation. I might tell you, if we did this as a nation, I'm telling you, things would just change overnight in our country. And so I want to talk about this game because this is the one game we should play, all right? Over the next few weeks, we're going to look at all these other games and how we need to kind of get rid of these games. But this is the one that if you really are into games, this is the one that we should play. Now, it's not a new game. I'm going to tell you, it's been around about 2,000 years, and it was introduced by the Apostle Paul. Now, the Apostle Paul, as many of you may know, he wrote more than half of the New Testament part of the Bible. And so he was a Jesus follower, but he didn't start that way. He started as a Pharisee, and a Pharisee is somebody who's highly religious and all about keeping the rules for themselves and making sure everybody else is keeping the rules. Like a real fun guy, right? Like everybody wants to be around the religious guy that keeps all the rules and makes sure you do too. So Paul, like nobody really wanted to be around Paul. And so Paul, he hated Christians. He was trying to shut down the church. And then one day he actually met Jesus, and his life changed. All right, his life changed, and because that's what happens to a lot of us. We think we know who the person of Jesus is, and then we're like, oh, wow, he's a little bit different than I thought he was, and we see a different side. That happens for Paul. And then he begins to bring these writings to us. Now, this is so important to understand. If you're like newer to faith or newer to the Bible or reading the Bible, the Apostle Paul basically takes the teachings of Jesus and he explains them for non-Jewish people. And so what that means for you and me is he basically takes the teachings of Jesus and he explains them for ordinary people. Jewish people were kind of the spiritual insiders, and so he explains them for everybody else who perhaps didn't have that insight. And so basically, he basically says, hey, God came and did something in the world for the world. In fact, he sent his son into the world. And so he writes these letters, in terms of what it looks like to follow Jesus to just ordinary people so they could figure out, okay, what does this look like for my life and for my relationships? And so one of these letters is just massive. I'm going to read you a part of it in a moment. He writes it to Christians living in first century Rome. And there's a game that he lists in here. He calls it the honor game, all right? So I think we should call it the honor game as well. Now, it's kind of like the Hunger Games, but it's not the Hunger Games, all right? It's nothing like the Hunger Games other than it's highly competitive, all right? And so, but this is kind of cool because you actually win this game by losing, all right? And the cool thing is you can play by yourself, all right? You don't even have to have anybody else playing along. But if multiple people play, say people begin to play at your work or begin to play in your neighborhood or maybe even within your home, I'm telling you, even if two people in your home begin to play, man, it begins to change things immediately. And so I want to show you how he describes it. Here's what he writes to this first century group of Christians trying to figure out what it looks like to follow God and do better in life. Here's what he says. He says, I want you to be devoted to one another in love. And it's almost like he pauses right there. He's like, that sounds kind of soft. He's like, it's a guy's guy. He's like, that just, I don't know if I'd really lean into that. He's like, it doesn't have much edge to it, doesn't have much grit to it. And so I want to show you a little more compelling phrase on what he says right here. I want to show you the Greek version because when it gets translated to English, it loses a little of its edge. And so here's kind of the Greek translation of Romans 12 right here. It basically says, give honor one another going before. All right, and so like that's horrible grammar right there. All right, but that's kind of the point. All right, he's saying, I want you to give honor to one another going before. And so what he's in essence saying is instead of being first, I want you to go first in putting the other person first. That's what he's saying. He's saying, I want you to be first in being the one to move first in putting the other person first. This is actually a game you can play right here. Now, he's like, this is a competition I want you to win. All right, most of the other ones, when it comes to relationships, they're only going to do damage. But he says, I want you to work at putting the other person first right here. I want you to honor one another. Not only honor one another, I want you to win the competition. I want you to so be focused and competitive on honoring the other person that you show honor to them before they show honor to you. Now, here's how our English translation kind of converts that into the English language, takes a little of the grit out of it. He says, be devoted to one another in love, honor one another, and then here's our word right here, above yourselves. All right, and so the question then is, what does it look like to do this right here? Well, what exactly is Paul talking about? How do we do this? What does it mean to honor another person above yourself? And here's basically what he means right here. He says, it's a choice. That's what it means. It means it's something that you choose to do. You choose to treat other people better than yourself. You choose to treat the people around you as if they deserve more honor than you do. To which immediately we push back, like hard in our hearts, and we go, yeah, but they don't deserve it. What if they don't deserve it? Who said they deserve it? And you know what Paul would say? Paul would say, that's not the point. You're missing the point. He'd say, I'm not saying that they deserve it. He's just saying this is something you choose to do every day. You choose with the people around you that they deserve more honor than you do. He says it's just a choice that you make. And then he writes another letter in the first century to another group of like Christians in another city known as Philippi. And he kind of doubles down on this thing right here. And so here's how he says it in this next version. He says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. I mean, listen, think about this. If we would just do that right there, like if we would just lean into that as a community, as a nation, as a world for just like 30 days, wow. Just imagine the world, the humanity we could be. He says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. And then here's the big idea right here. Rather in humility, and again, he's saying it a different way. In humility, value others above yourself. In other words, regard one another as more important than yourself. All right, he says, regard one another as them having greater value than you. All right, as if they have more worth than you. Not because they are more worth than you. He says, that's irrelevant. We're getting stuck on irrelevant stuff if you go there. He says, no, this is a choice that you make every single day to treat them as if they are of more worth than you. Now, here's what I know about you. All right, and many of you, I don't know. Many of you I've not necessarily met. Those of you online, I don't necessarily know you. But here's what I know about all of you. You know how to do this. All right, you actually can do this. All right, you don't even need a lesson in how to do this. You just have to decide whether or not you're going to do it. All right, and here's kind of how I know that you know how to do what Paul talks about right here. All right, so I want you to think about this question. Have you ever met someone that's more important than you are? And if the answer is no, we got some bigger issues. All right, so like you need to come back for another weekend when we'll talk about that, all right? But I want you to think about, have you ever met someone, who have you met that you would say, wow, they were much more important to me than me? And it might be like a CEO of a company. It might be a celebrity that you met. Maybe you got an autograph after a game and you're like, wow, I feel like I'm standing in greatness. Maybe it was somebody you rubbed shoulders with. It could have been that you shook their hand. Maybe you didn't know what to say. You were just close and you did like a secret photo. You're like, I'm not going to show you I'm taking a picture, but I'm going to snap a photo. In those moments, we've all behaved when we meet someone that we hold in high esteem. We've all behaved a certain way, right? And so here's the question. In those moments, even if you didn't have a conversation, just when you were around somebody that you're like, wow, this is somebody who's pretty important right here. How did you treat them? How did you treat them? Now, again, I know the answer to that question. You treated them and responded to them as if they were more important than you. meaning you probably didn't interrupt them. Even if they said something that was off, you probably just sat and listened. All right, you didn't correct them. All right, if they laughed, if they were like told a joke and they were laughing, you just joined in. You're like, oh yeah, like you may not even thought it was funny, right? But you're like, well, okay, I'm going to join in. You deferred to them. You honored them. All right, so again, let me circle around. You know how to do this. And what Paul is saying right here is, what if you and I just did that for everybody? I want you to do that for everybody right here, not just the famous somebodies. So back to Paul. He says, honor one another above yourselves. Treat everybody, not just select people. Treat everybody you come in contact with as if they are more valuable than you. All right? And see, this is a game we can play. You can play this all the time. You can play this at work. You can play it by yourself. You can play it with a team. You can do this at home. You can do this in your neighborhood. You can do this when you're shopping. All right? You can go around and say, you know what? Today I'm going to make it a game. I'm going to go around and I'm going to try to out-honor everyone. I'm going to win the honor game today, in fact. With every single person I interact with, I want to win the honor game. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have hard conversations. It just means that you don't dishonor. You honor. All right? You honor them as if they were more important or valuable than you. And I know some of us are going, Curt, seriously, what world do you live in? Like, this just seems so Pollyannish. This seems so like pie in the sky. Seriously, like, I mean, if you're just like, just think about this logically. I mean, nobody's more important than anybody else. I mean, listen, we're all created equal, right? We're all created equal. God created us all in his image. He created equal value in every single person, all right? I'll give you that. But for argument's sake, all right, I'll tell you, you're right, but you're missing the point right here. That's not what Paul's saying right here. Paul's not saying that someone is more valuable. He's saying, I want you to treat them as if they are. I think this is increasingly difficult in our world today. I think there's a lot of things in our world that are making this more and more difficult, especially for those of us who say, hey, I want to follow Jesus and live following his ways. In fact, I was really inspired a few months ago. One of my daughters was on a kind of a college journey, trying to go into different schools, trying to figure out where she was going to land this fall. And she kind of narrowed her decisions down. And we did a visit to Xavier University. And we were sitting listening to the president of the university, and I was just so enamored with some of the things that she was talking about. And Xavier's a Jesuit university. It's a Catholic school. And their president's Colleen Hanich. And ironically, she's the first woman to ever be a president at Xavier, the Jesuit university, and the first lay person, like not a priest. And so I want to list something out about what she said, because I just think it was so powerful. Because I think a lot of times in our world today, in our culture, being a Jesus follower in our country, in our community, and saying, okay, what does it look like to give people value? All right, because I'm like, I don't know if they deserve that. Okay, Jesus says, I want you to give them value. I'm not asking you to decide if they're more valuable. They're not, but I want you to treat them like they are. And so she actually, talked some about how at Xavier, they say together we strive for more inclusion and more diversity and more equity and more social responsibility. And this was a time when some of the things in our country, DEI and diversity things were coming down and being removed from public institutions and campuses. And again, just so you know, this is not a political thing. If you're thinking we're going politics, we don't do that. I'm just trying to clarify where Jesus is in our world right now. And so she actually got asked the question, hey, with all this stuff going on in our world, is this something you're still going to be able to do, to strive for more inclusion and diversity and lifting people up that don't have opportunities and giving people opportunities that otherwise wouldn't have them? And I was so inspired with what she said. She paused and she said, our virtues will never change here at Xavier, because for us, the reasons that we do this was never a program, an initiative, or some kind of initiative that people are trying to put into our society. We actually do that because that's what our leader Jesus, our King Jesus, actually modeled for us and calls us to do. And I thought, wow. In essence, what she's saying is, no, we're looking to the Jesus of the Gospels. That's why we always say, if you want to know what God is like, just look to the Jesus of the Gospels, at how he lifts people up. Look at how he honors people. Look at how he tells and values others as being more important than himself. And so again, that's not a political thing. This is like how do we get grounded in what Jesus is about? And so back to Paul right here. He gives us next the why, for why we should do this. Now, I just want to say that if you're not a Christian or you're a person from another faith, or you're just here checking out faith, I'm going to kind of leave you right here with everything we've talked about so far. All right? And I'm telling you, if you just take the stuff we've talked about and you walk that out at work, you walk that out at home, I guarantee you it will make your home life better, your relationships better. You'll just be better at life all the way around. But what I'm going to say next, the Apostle Paul gives his reason for those of us that are Jesus followers. Why, as Jesus followers, we're called to do this. And what he says next takes my excuses away. Right? It takes my excuses to be like, well, I don't know if I need to honor them that way. And honestly, if you're a Jesus follower, it takes your excuses away as well. And so here's what he says. He says, have this attitude. He says, I want you to have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Christ Jesus. In other words, since you are a follower of Jesus, I want you to adopt. I want you to follow. I want you to take on the attitude and the approach and the posture of Jesus. Paul's like, yeah, as a follower of Jesus, I want you to have the same attitude that Jesus has right here. And we go, okay, well, what was his attitude? Well, his attitude was, I'm going to treat others as if they're more valuable than he was. And yet they weren't. I mean, think about this. He was God in a body. And yet in his life, if you follow him through the Gospels, he treated people every single day as if they were more valuable than him. Listen to what he says next. Paul says, who being the very nature God, talking about Jesus, God in a body. This is amazing. He says, Jesus did not consider his equality with God something to use to his own advantage. Meaning he never played the God card. He never showed up and said, hey, guess what? My name's Jesus. I'm God. I'd like those seats right there. If you could have those people move out of the way. He never did that. He never did that. You know what he did? Jesus always leveraged his power and his authority for the benefit of others. He treated others as if they were more valuable than him. Were they? No. He's God in a body. All right, but he says this is what the kingdom looks like. This is the inverted pyramid. Where he's not at the top being served, he's at the bottom lifting and serving people. Meaning it's not about people on top sucking all the life and resources this way. It's about the people with the life and resources giving life and sharing with those who perhaps need a little encouragement, who need a boost, who need a lift. It's sharing opportunities with them as if they were more important. And Paul says, this is the kingdom of God. In fact, this was what our king actually set before us. Not only did he not use his power to his own advantage, but look at this. It says he made himself nothing. It goes on. It says, rather, he made himself nothing. And this is the point of the game right here. All right, this game, if we're going to play games relationally, this is the one game that Jesus says, okay, I want you to play this game. Jesus chose to treat others as if they were more important than he was. Were they? No, absolutely not. But he treated them as if they were. And you know what else he did? And this is the gospel right here. He treated you as if you were more important than him. And he treated me as if I was more important than him. I mean, he took on my sin and he took on your sin and he humbled himself. He died in public as a slave, as a traitor to his nation and the empire, and yet he wasn't. And if our king did that for us, we lose all of our excuses in terms of why we shouldn't be doing that for others. So again, if you're not a Jesus follower, I'm telling you, you just put this into practice this week, I guarantee you're going to find that you're going to be so much better at life. But if you are a Jesus follower, Paul says, hey, Jesus took all the excuses away. He made himself nothing by taking on the very nature of a servant. And you know what servants do? Servants actually go to the back of the line. Servants let others go first. And a servant to who? A servant to you, a servant to me, a servant to humanity. And then Jesus says to me, every single day, Curt, I want you to go out today and I want you to follow my example. I want you to play the honor game. And I'm going to be honest, I don't always do it so well. There's days where I struggle with this, but every single morning, I want you to play the honor game. I want you to show Julie, your wife, I want you to show her more honor than she shows you. I want you to show more honor to the people that you work with than they show to you. I want you to show more honor to the people you serve than they show to you. I want you to show more honor to the community, the people you interact with at the grocery store, when you're at sporting events, than they show to you. And I want you to be aggressively competitive at honoring other people, not to get their attention, not to be like, hey, let me get a pat on the back. No, so that they feel, you know what he wants them to feel? He wants them to feel the honor that God has bestowed on them as one of his dearly loved children. I mean, imagine, just imagine what our world would look like if we actually did this. Imagine what our community would look like. Imagine what we could do as a humanity if we could just get this right. So Paul invites us. He says, hey, I want you to step onto the court. I want you to step onto the field. He's like, I want you to get into this game, the honor game. Because when you play this game, everybody wins. And so the goal is to out-honor, to out-serve, to out-give. But see, in order to play this game, we've actually got to stop all the other games. Because see, they're incompatible. All the ones we listed earlier, they actually work against the honor game. So we're going to encourage you over the next 3 weeks what it looks like to pack all these other games up and to make this our main game. So next step today, if you're playing along on your connection card, man, I want to encourage you. Would you jump on the field on this week? Would you out-honor? Would you out-serve? Would you say, okay, I'm going to look for opportunities to out-give this week? All right, and then a second one on there, I hope you won't miss next week for part 2 of the games we play. Let's go ahead and stand. I want to pray for us. We're going to sing one more song. Father, I just want to thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about these things. Thank you for people who have modeled these things for us. We've all seen it. We've been humbled by it. We've been on the receiving end of people that live this way. We've been humbled by their humility. Father, for some of us, our struggle is at home. For others of us, our struggle is at work. Some of the struggle really everywhere is because of our insecurity. Perhaps because of what we've seen, what was modeled for us, maybe even fears that rise up in us, and all those play into this. And so God, I just pray that you give us eyes to see the world the way you see it, and then give us the courage then to do it because we know how. I mean, it's just a matter of doing it. It's a decision to say, oh, I'm going to choose to actually live this way. I'm going to choose to follow my heavenly leader, Jesus, in treating others as if they're more important than me. And so would you empower us to do that, to have that same attitude as Christ Jesus himself? We know we don't have the strength in us to do it on our own, but would you give us the strength to do that? We want to be known as that kind of church. We want to be known as that kind of people. And so I just pray all these things, Jesus, according to your character and your identity. Amen.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Take a moment to follow our podcast on your preferred platform, and be sure to download our app to stay informed on everything happening here at Crosspoint. And if you like what you heard today, don't hesitate to share it with a friend that might need to hear it too.